The sun was barely climbing over the wide, dust-brushed plains of Texas when the creak of old wood and the muffled cluck of restless hens stirred Ethan McGraw from his morning chores, boots crunching against dry earth. The tall cowboy rounded the corner of his weathered barn to see a small shadow moving inside his henhouse, quick hands slipping warm eggs into a tattered cloth sack as if they were coins from a bank vault, and for a second he just stood there, one hand on the brim of his hat, the other resting near the holster at his hip, watching how the girl's thin frame trembled not from guilt but from hunger. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn, and when she finally looked up, those eyes, storm-gray and fierce, met his with a mixture of defiance and shame that told him she'd run before if he gave her the chance. "You got 3 seconds to tell me why you're robbing my hens," he said in a voice like gravel and thunder, but she straightened, clutching the sack, and answered, "I ain't robbing, I'm surviving," and something in the way she said it froze him, because Ethan had known hunger too, back when the land was less generous. He stepped forward, the boards groaning under his boots, and she flinched like a cornered animal, ready to bolt, but he didn't draw his gun, he just tipped his head back and studied her like a man deciding the fate of a stray Mustang, and then, with a slow, almost dangerous smile, he said, "You got 2 choices, girl, you can work for me and earn your keep, or you can wear white beside me forever," the words hanging in the dusty air like a dare, making her jaw drop as if she couldn't tell whether he was joking or dead serious. Her eyes flicked to the open field beyond him, the endless stretch where freedom waited, but something about his stance, tall, steady, unflinching, rooted her to the spot, and in that strange silence, the wind stirred the scent of hay and earth between them, and far off a hawk cried, the sound sharp and lonely. She swallowed, clutching the eggs tighter, her mind racing between the wild terror of trusting a man she'd just met and the gnawing ache in her belly that said she wouldn't last another week out here alone. Ethan didn't move, didn't push, he just let the offer hang there, the morning sun casting his shadow long across the dirt like the outline of a man who didn't lose at bargaining. "You decide now," he finally said, his voice low, "because in 10 seconds, I'm walking back to my fence, and I won't come looking for you again," and she felt the weight of those words like a gate closing. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, her lips parting as the first hint of an answer formed, and though neither knew it yet, whatever choice she made next would set fire to both their lives in ways they could never undo. Her lips trembled before the words finally tumbled out. "I'll work," she said, the defiance gone but the steel still in her voice, and Ethan gave a slow nod, as if he'd known her answer before she'd spoken. He took the sack of eggs from her hands, set them back into their nests with surprising gentleness, then motioned for her to follow, his long stride eating up the dusty path toward the ranch house, the boards of the porch creaking under his boots as he glanced back to make sure she was still there. The girl, her name, he'd soon learn, was Clara, hesitated at the steps, her bare toes curling against the wood, but hunger and some unspoken pull toward the men in the weathered had pushed her forward, and soon she was inside the dim, cool shade of his kitchen, where the smell of coffee and wood smoke wrapped around her like a blanket. Ethan poured her a mug and slid it across the table, leaning on the counter with that same unreadable expression, his eyes studying every twitch of her fingers as she clutched the cup. "Rule number 1, he said, voice low, "you work for me, you keep your hands clean, no stealing from my hens, no taking from town folk, not even a nail from the fence. You break that, you're gone." She nodded, her throat tight, but part of her bristled at the idea of rules from a man she didn't know, a man whose gaze felt like it could peel the truth off her bones. Over the next days, she worked from sunup to sundown, her small frame bent over feed sacks, her hands raw from scrubbing troughs, and every so often she'd catch him watching, not with suspicion, but with something quieter, almost like he was trying to solve a riddle. The more she worked, the more the hunger in her belly faded, replaced by another hunger she didn't dare name. One evening, as the sky bled gold and the air smelled of rain, trouble came in the form of 3 riders on the ridge, their shadows long and their horses restless. Clara saw Ethan's jaw tighten as they rode closer, their leader, a wiry man with a scar like a knife slash across his cheek, calling out, "McGraw, you still got what's ours?" Ethan stepped down from the porch, boots sinking into the soft dirt, his hand resting casually on his revolver, and Clara froze by the doorway, her breath catching because the way those men looked at her made her skin crawl. "Ain't nothing here for you," Ethan said, his voice calm but with a thread of steel, and the scarred man's eyes flicked to Clara, a slow grin curling his lips. "That's so. Looks to me like you picked up something new," he said, and Clara's stomach dropped. The moment felt like the air before a storm, and Ethan's gaze cut back to her, not soft this time, but sharp and warning, as if to say stay inside. The riders shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons, and Clara's heart pounded, the faint memory of Ethan's first words to her, "Work for me, or wear white beside me forever," suddenly sounding less like a strange joke and more like a shield he might be ready to wield. She stepped back into the shadows, but her mind was spinning, wondering just what kind of enemies this cowboy carried, and whether she'd walked into a life safer than the one she'd fled, or far, far more dangerous. And as the thunder rolled across the plains, she knew one thing: this was no longer just about eggs, hunger, or shelter. Something was coming for them both, and it would demand more from her than work. It might demand her whole heart.